Hi, welcome. I'm Janae Kane.
And I'm Eric Liu, and we're the co-founders of Citizen University, and this is Civic Saturday.
We are so glad that you are here today. We are coming to you from our home in Seattle, Washington, where along with our colleagues, we are based here, Citizen University in Seattle, and we just want to take a minute or a second or two to look over at the chat and see who you are and where you are joining from today.
Yeah, it's fantastic already. We've got folks from Nebraska, Caroline from Fremont in Seattle, Shamichael Hallman, who gave a sermon last week, checking in from Memphis, Phoenix, Arizona, Bolingbrook, Illinois, of course, crew from Portland and Beaverton, Oregon.
Wonderful.
Yeah, all kinds of places. Minnesota. It's just great to see all of you.
That is great. Well, from Seattle, then last week to Memphis, and today to Portland, and all points in between. We are just so filled with joy that you are here with us today. And for those of you who are watching in the future, welcome. What's going on?
Well, we mentioned Portland because we have a really special guest here with us today. We're so grateful to be joined by our friend, poet, democracy activist, Wendy Willis. And Wendy herself, in a place called the Crow's Nest, has some compatriots there. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to see you. Welcome to Portland. We're here at the Crow's Nest, which is our house's name, and I'm here with David Biespiel and Lightning Luke, who happen to be the best quarantine partners available. And so we're really glad to be sharing Civic Saturday with you all from Portland.
Well, it's amazing. It is amazing to have Wendy, you there, along with a literally poet in residence and musician in residence in your residence. So that's a pretty sweet way to do Civic Saturday, and a pretty great way to have to shelter in place. We'll be hearing more from all of you, but thank you. And we just wanted to say a word about Civic Saturday and Citizen University, especially for those of you who are joining us for the first time. Our work at Citizen University, as Janae mentioned, we're based in Seattle, but we do work all around the country, trying to foster a culture of powerful, responsible citizenship. And in our work and our programs, we're really animated by several core beliefs, which I think are pretty pertinent right now in these times. One is that we're all better off when we're all better off. This idea that I think we feel very palpably right now, that you can't just write off one part of the community and take care of yourself, that all our fates are entwined. The second core belief that really drives our work is that society becomes how you behave. So sure, that goes with wearing of masks and keeping your social distance and so forth, but also it goes with things like civility and courtesy and compassion. And those things are just as contagious as anything else, as are their opposites. And then the final belief that really animates our work right now is the idea that democracy works only if enough of us believe that democracy works. That this is, in a sense, a matter of mutual faith, that we got to make this thing work together by just saying we're going to try to make this thing work together. And that's what Civic Saturdays are all about. These gatherings, which we started several years ago here in Seattle and have since spread around the country, are gatherings that are a civic analog to a faith gathering. They're not church or synagogue or mosque, but they have this flow and this feel and this arc of singing, hearing poetry, hearing civic scripture, and as you will today, a civic sermon. And the idea is that our creed, the ideas and ideals that we profess to believe in as Americans and that we have yet to fully live up to, require nurturing with a sense of ritual and a sense of mutual commitment by coming together like this. And doing it virtually, maybe something's lost, but we actually think something great is gained too. The fact that we got people from all across our great land who are joining us right now in this gathering is pretty awesome. And so among the people we've been training all over the United States to lead Civic Saturdays in their own communities, we have this program called the Civic Seminary, which you can check out on our website. Among the great people we've trained is in fact Wendy Willis from Portland, and she's been leading Civic Saturdays not just in her hometown, but all across Oregon in different settings. Wendy, will you tell us a little bit about how that's been going and what you've been experiencing in Oregon?
Sure. We've actually had a lot of fun with our Civic Saturdays. The very first one we hosted was over 4th of July weekend, and we did it in a circus tent here in Portland, and we had a big picnic in it afterwards. It was really fun. And then we've done Civic Saturdays everywhere from community colleges. We did one on a working ranch in the fall. We had one planned for this spring at a beautiful boat launch on the McKenzie River that we had to postpone, as many things were postponed. So we're looking forward to being there up on the river together soon.
Well, Wendy, that sounds lovely. And I look forward to hopping in my car or on the train when we can and coming down to experience that next Civic Saturday with you. So Wendy's told you a little bit about her Civic Saturdays. Eric has given you the arc of most Civic Saturdays. Let me just share with you right now what we're going to do for the next 30 to 45 minutes so that you can just sit back, relax, but also stay engaged. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear some poetry and some music, because art, sounds, poetry are the things that help us make sense of where we are right now. As Eric said, we're going to have civic scripture, civic sermon, some more poetry and music. But to begin with, we're just going to take a moment to connect with each other and with ourselves in some silent meditation. And I'm going to lead us through that. And then right after that, we're going to have another moment where we want to hear from you and we want you to hear from each other in the chat. And we're going to ask you to just share some of your thoughts on what matters most to you right now. But don't do that at this moment. Let's take a moment to center together, and then we'll give you that chance. So if you feel comfortable, and I will do it, close your eyes. Root your feet, or if you're sitting, root your body down into the floor. Really feel your feet or yourself getting heavier in place. And we're going to take in 3 deep breaths. Inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Let's go. Now let's just sit together with our eyes closed in silence. Take in another breath and let it out with a sound. Open your eyes. Get your fingers ready. Wake up your brain. And just take a moment or two, again, as quickly as you can. Don't think about it. And just write in the chat what matters most to you right now. Go ahead, do that. We have time together. And we're going to read a few of them if we can, but we are in the future because we're on Zoom and you're on YouTube. So if they don't show up, we're just going to move on. Are you ready? All right, I think what we'll do, I will come back to that in a minute. Now we're going to go to our poet and hear from David.
Okay, thank you so much. We're so glad to be here and participating with you. And the first poem I'm going to read is by the poet Stanley Plumley. And in the spirit of civic connection, I should say that Stanley Plumley was my teacher for the last 30 years, and he passed last year. And this is one of my favorite poems of his, called Wrong Side of the River. I watched you on the wrong side of the river, waving. You were trying to tell me something. You used both hands and sort of ran back and forth as if to say, look behind you, look out, behind you. I wanted to wave back, but you began shouting and I didn't want you to think I understood. So I did nothing but stand still, thinking that's what to do on the wrong side of the river. After a while, you did too. We stood like that for a long time. Then I raised a hand as if to be called on, and you raised a hand as if to the same question. That's Wrong Side of the River by Stanley Plumley.
Thank you, David, so much. David Biespiel, poet, also democracy activist in his own way. And before I turn it over to Lucas Biespiel, to Lightning Luke, to lead us in song, I actually want to read some of the things that you all have been sharing in response to the prompt in chat. What matters most to you right now? And it's just been beautiful to see this. Civility and humor, community, laughter, connection, good Wi-Fi matter. That's a pretty good one. Regina's telling us I could use some hope that this will come to an end in some way soon, but thanks for asking.
Oh, I see one that says, noticing what is emerging.
Yeah.
I love that.
Family is coming up a lot here. And I think this spirit of just connection is a testament to why we're gathering here right now. And as Janae said, we ask this question because we know it's pulsing through our hearts all the time. And we orchestrate Civic Saturday the way we do because we think there's a lot of ways to express that. And poetry is one, but music is another. And with that, Lightning Luke, Lucas Biespiel, take it away.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Lightning Luke, and this has been really wonderful being here. A song that Wendy asked me to play today that I think is a kind of fitting in our theme here and what we're going to be talking about is a Bob Dylan song that I think a lot of you will know, and you can feel free to sing along at home. I know that that's about the closest thing to a live concert y'all can get right now, so I think that might be good. This is Tangled Up in Blue by Bob Dylan. Early one morning the sun was shining, she was lying in bed, wondering if she'd change it all, if her hair was still red. Folks, they said our lives together sure were gonna be rough, but she never did like Mama's homemade dress, and Papa's bank book wasn't big enough. Me, I'm standing on the side of the road, rain falling off of my shoes, heading out for the East Coast. God knows I had some dues getting through, tangled up in the blue. She was married when they first met, soon to be divorced. I helped her out of a jam, I guess, but I used a little too much force. Drove that car as far as we could and abandoned it out west, splitting up on the docks at night, post agreeing it was best. She turned around to look at him as he was walking away. You whispered over our shoulder, we'll meet again someday on the avenue, tangled up in the blue. We had a job in the great Northwoods, working in an old hotel. I never did like it all that much, and one day the axe just fell. I drifted down to New Orleans, lucky not to be destroyed, working for a while on a fishing boat docked right outside of Delacroix. But all the while I wasn't alone, the past was close behind. I met a lot of women, but she never escaped my mind, and I just grew tangled up in blue. I lived with them in Morningwood Street, in the basement down the stairs. There was music in the cafes at night and revolution in the air. And later on I started dealing with slaves, and something inside of him died. She had to sell everything she owned and froze up inside. And when it all came crashing down, I became withdrawn. The only thing I knew how to do was keep on keeping on, like a bird that flew, tangled up in blue. So now I'm going on back again. I got to get to her somehow. All these people I used to know, they're illusions to me now. Some are mathematicians, some are truck drivers' wives. I don't know how it all got started. I don't know what they're doing with their lives. But me, I'm still on the road, heading for another joint. We always did feel the same, we just saw it from a different point of view. Tangled up in blue.
Oh, Lightning Luke, thank you so much. That is a beautiful song. I've listened to that song so many times, especially when I was young. It's one of my favorites. But to hear it right now, at this moment, in this context, coming from the crow's nest, is all the more powerful. Y'all couldn't see me, but I was rocking out. Hey, I want to take a moment to remind you, or to tell you if you're just tuning in for the first time, that we have something called Civic Circles that immediately follows when Civic Saturday closes online in this form. You can join the Civic Circle, and there's small discussion groups. And if you look over in the chat, there is a link where you can sign up, and then you'll receive the information from our team on how you can join that right after this. And I've heard that they're wonderful and moving and a great way to connect and talk about the themes that have come up today.
For those of you who've been to physical Civic Saturday back when we could do them in buildings and spaces, that's always been a core part of the gathering. After the sermon and after closing poem and song, people stay and form up into circles of 4 or 6 to dive deep into how they were moved, what they're reflecting on, how they want to pivot to action in different ways. And so we invite you to do that virtually. And if you go to that link, you can sign up and get the link to do that in Zoom.
Okay, Eric, so we've had our welcome, we've had some poetry, some music, some centering meditation. What's going to happen next for folks that are just joining us?
Yeah, well, always now at this point in the flow of the gathering, we have readings of texts that are central to different aspects of the American experience. You may not know the texts, but they say something important about who we are, who we wish to be. And we think of these texts as civic scripture, because as we've said before, this whole gathering is a civic analog to a faith gathering. And today, Wendy has chosen 2 pieces of civic scripture. And what Janae and I are going to do in a moment is read these 2 pieces. And then Wendy's going to come straight in to deliver her civic sermon today. These 2 pieces are really powerful, and I want to tell you about both of them first, and then we'll just read each of them. This first one is by Dorothy Day from her book, The Long Loneliness, which was published in 1952, an autobiographical book. And if you know Dorothy Day, you'll know that this excerpt, not surprisingly, uses the idiom of the Christian faith. And if you know Dorothy Day, not surprisingly, you'll realize that that language is all completely transcendent across faiths, and that its message fundamentally is a message that relationship matters most, that companionship is where transcendence is actually to be found. And that was the spirit of this first reading. And then the second reading is going to come from Braiding Sweetgrass, a book, a very popular book right now. It's actually on Janae's nightstand and behind us right now, by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This, in the scene that you're going to hear an excerpt from, Robin Kimmerer is walking on Cascade Head on the Oregon coast. There's a meadow on the bluff rather than a forest because of the indigenous practice of ritually burning the headlands each fall as the salmon come back up the rivers and the streams from the ocean. But the practice ended after settlers moved in, and many of the native coastal communities were then decimated by disease. And in the excerpt that you'll hear, Robin Wall Kimmerer recalls that practice. So, a little bit of context.
Dorothy Day, from her autobiography, The Long Loneliness, 1952. The most significant thing about the Catholic worker is poverty, some say. The most significant thing is community, others say. We are not alone anymore. But the final word is love. At times, it has been, in the words of Father Zosima, a harsh and dreadful thing, and our very faith in love has been tried by fire. We cannot love God unless we love each other, and to love, we must know each other. We know him in the breaking of bread, and we know each other in the breaking of bread, and we are not alone anymore. Heaven is a banquet, and life is a banquet too, even with a crust where there is companionship. We have all known the long loneliness, and we have learned that the only solution is love, and that love comes with community. It all happened while we sat there talking, and it is still going on.
This is by Robin Wall Kimmerer in Braiding Sweetgrass. I just stand there, tears running down my cheeks in nameless emotion that tastes of joy and of grief. Joy for the being of the shimmering world, and grief for what we have lost. The grasses remember the nights they were consumed by fire, lighting the way back with a conflagration of love between species. Who today even knows what that means? I drop to my knees in the grass, and I can hear the sadness, as if the land itself was crying for its people. Come home, come home. There are often other walkers here. I suppose that's what it means when they put down the camera and stand on the headland, straining to hear above the wind with that wistful look and gaze out to sea. They look like they're trying to remember what it would be like to love the world.
Oh, Eric and Janae, thank you so much. You both read those pieces so beautifully. One of the tremendous gifts of getting to do a Civic Saturday is getting to hear readings that I love and songs that I love and poems that I love. And so thank you for sharing all of those. And thanks for joining us here in Portland. Eric said a couple weeks ago that he was going to speak extemporaneously because he didn't want to have the words on the page separate him from all of you, but I just can't do that. So I've actually written something for you, and I'm going to read it to you today, and hopefully that won't be too separating, but I'm just grateful to be in such good company today. We've been at this a good long time now, haven't we? By my count, this is my 53rd day in quarantine, and I know some of you have been self-isolating longer, and I know some of you are going to work and risking your health and peace of mind for the rest of us. Some of you have lost jobs or feel like you could at any moment. Some of you have lost people, loved ones. And no matter how routine this practice of social distancing becomes, we can't forget that, can we? These are not just numbers. These are people, parents, children, siblings, friends. We're so sorry to see them go. And we're so sorry for your loss. But in addition to the sheer scale of the loss and the fear that it could get worse, that the devastation could come even closer, we recognize that we're at a generational moment, one that requires everything we've got. And we find ourselves wondering if we're up to it, if our systems are up to it, if our country is up to it. A week or two ago, an article started circulating amongst my friends. Or circulating might be too tame a word for it. Talk about a contagion. Within a couple of days, dozens of people I knew were sharing it with me and with each other. It was an article by George Packer that will run in the June issue of the Atlantic, but it already has been devoured online. The money sentence is this: every morning in the endless month of March, Americans woke up to find themselves citizens of a failed state. Packer went on to detail all the ways in which greed and gridlock and avarice have influenced our response to COVID, the ways in which structural inequities made worse by inadequate healthcare and bad faith politics were lethal, and were particularly lethal to those who are already vulnerable in a rigged system. Though it was stark, there wasn't that much news in the article. The characterization was bracing, but it wasn't particularly revelatory. The thing that was striking for me was not the article itself, but my friends' response to it. It reduced several of them to tears. Others said they were mired in despair. Despair. Somehow many of us thought when it came down to life or death, When it came down to the biggest crisis of our lifetimes, our government would rise to the occasion, that we would figure it out and respond with compassion, incompetence, and creativity. And so far, at least, there have been a lot of failures in that regard. There have been some successes too, but there have been failures. And the disappointment at those failures is profound and deep. And so in that sense, despair is a rational reaction. Despair is tempting too. I get it. I wake up in despair at least one morning a week. And sometimes the only thing I can think to do is go downstairs and make a hair-raisingly strong cup of coffee. But despair isn't a place to linger. But despair isn't a place to linger. Despair is an emotion that lets us off the hook. It tells us that our hands are tied. It tells us that we are powerless. It detaches us from the world and from each other. Despair says, there's nothing I can do, nothing you can do. It has a tinge of throwing up our hands and going back to bed. And we know that. We don't want to hang around in despair. We want to encourage each other to goad ourselves and one another out of despair when we sense it. We want to remind each other that there are other ways to be. Reflexively, when faced with despair, we often turn to hope. Hope that someday it can be better, that it will be better. And believe me, I'm not here to dunk on hope. I lean on hope and its more vivid cousin, imagination, every single day. And hope has brought us out of some pretty dark corners. But hope has its own traps, especially when it's offered up in response to something as obliterating as despair. Hope has a kind of conditionalness about it. It attaches itself to an outcome that we can't control. Hope says that if things will change, then I will not despair. But see the loop there? What if things don't change? Or don't change in the way we want them to? Inside of it, hope contains the seed of expectation and disappointment, and then the reignition of despair. So here's my point, and one that I know is not without controversies. The antidote to despair is not hope. The antidote to despair is love. And here I have to confess that I'm not even exactly sure what I'm talking about when I say that the antidote to despair is love. But I know that I'm grasping for a handhold, and I want to do it in company. And today I want to do it in your company. As I think about it today, there are three things that strike me about the kind of love that protects us against despair, or really that lifts us out of it when we rightly and inevitably feel it. The first is that we need to recognize and amplify love when we see it. Spread it like the positive social contagion that it is. We are learning more than we ever wanted to about how disease spreads, but love spreads too, like Eric said, love spreads too. Our youngest daughter, who's just in the other room, is a high school senior. And needless to say, this is not the spring that she and her friends, or my nephew and his friends, have been dreaming of. This is not the culmination that any of us were expecting when we dropped her off at her kindergarten class 13 years ago. The disappointments are crushing. She lost her last week as an outdoor school counselor. She lost her prom yesterday. She lost her final dance recital, graduation. Her long-planned 18th birthday party consisted of her and her best friend standing 6 feet apart for 20 minutes on our front porch. When her friend went to leave, they reached the tips of their fingers toward each other to say goodbye. And in a society where ritual, particularly rites of passage, are so few, these losses are real. And they could be cause for despair. And yet there's another story to tell. Another story that Violet, our daughter, will be able to share with her children and grandchildren and all the grandchildren after that. The story is one of overwhelming, runaway, contagious love. Violet and all of us can tell the story of how the whole world stopped to protect the most vulnerable among us. Millions, billions of people sacrificed livelihoods and precious time with friends and family and long saved for trips and their own social and emotional well-being in order to keep this deadly virus from sickening and maybe even killing their neighbors. Violet and her friends know that they're young and strong and unlikely to become really ill from COVID-19. But they also know they could spread it to someone else who might not be so lucky. And so they stay home. And so they sacrifice their prom and their last sweet hours with friends. And so many of us stay home. And others of us drive to work, to hospitals with inadequate protective gear, to grocery stores that are overrun with anxious customers, to farms and canneries and factories that keep the rest of us fed and safe. Yes, George Packer, there are reasons to despair. But while we may get up day after day to witness a failed state, we also get up every day to one of the most massive collective expressions of love and concern the world has ever known, and we don't want to miss it. We want to keep our eyes and hearts open so we can tell the story to ourselves and to future generations. But it's not enough to recall these hazy days of shared sacrifice and affection, is it? Some days it has to be fiercer than that. I think it's telling that both Dorothy Day and Robin Wall Kimmerer wrote about love in terms of fire. Dorothy Day, looking back on her long life of struggle and solidarity, wrote about love being tested by fire. Because love, especially love that sets out to destabilize wealth and power, is dangerous, and there are plenty of forces that would like to snuff that love out. So yeah, Dorothy Day is right. The love that they forged at the Catholic Worker was tested by fire. And in Robin Wall Kimmerer's case, the love that she wrote about was fire. She told the story of the first people of Cascade Head and how they burned the grasses and trees on the headland every fall in the first salmon ceremony. How they called the salmon upriver with a blaze that could be seen across the ocean for hundreds of miles. How the burned ground was fertilized by ash, creating a lush spring meadow for elk and other grazing species. As Kimmerer wrote, people loved the salmon the way fire loves grass and the blaze loves the darkness of the sea. It's a wild love these two women celebrate. The kind of love that requires our willingness to withstand fire, the kind of love that requires our willingness to use fire, to be fire, to light a beacon and watch it burn. And finally, there's one more thing that we are called to do in love, and this is the hardest one. Right now, in this moment, we have to teach ourselves to love what is broken. Sometimes I think it's easy to take pride in withdrawing love, to take pride in turning away. We feel that if someone hurts us or disappoints us or does something ugly, it makes us better, more right, more moral if we shun them and detach from them, if we deprive them of love. But here's the thing. We have to expand our capacity to love what is broken and torn, what is sagging and misshapen. We have to love what is awkward and crestfallen, what is ill-mannered. We have to love what is discarded and seemingly useless. We have to love what is ugly and wrong, and we have to love what is sometimes downright hateful. Because if we don't, there is nothing at all to love. Because the truth is, all of us are broken. All of us are imperfect and sometimes petty and sometimes hateful. And if we decide we will only love what is impeccable and unblemished and smart and well-behaved and perfectly kind, we are fooling ourselves. We are setting up that cycle of expectation and disappointment that will lead us right into the jaws of despair. Lately, I've taken up mending. And by this, I don't mean metaphorical mending, I mean actual mending, darning socks and patching jeans and sewing up tiny moth holes in sweaters. It turns out that there's some beautiful mending traditions from around the world. Japanese mending is nothing short of an art form. You should look it up. And Lord knows I'm not that good at it yet, but I do love connecting myself to the sheep and the rancher and the garment worker who pieced the sweater together. I love tending that broken object, recognizing its worth and making it more whole. I'm reminded of the words of Brian Stevenson, one of my living heroes. Brian founded the Equal Justice Initiative to represent people on death row and children who are caught up in a punitive and cruel criminal justice system. Brian also led the campaign to found the Community Remembrance Project to commemorate the victims of lynching in America. This is tough work. There's a lot of hate and hardship. But for Brian, this work does not disconnect him from others. Rather, it reconnects him. As he wrote in his memoir, Just Mercy, we are all broken by something. We have all hurt someone and been hurt. We all share the condition of brokenness, even if our brokenness is not equivalent. Sometimes we're fractured by the choices we make. Sometimes we're shattered by things we never would have chosen. But our brokenness is also the source of our common humanity, the basis for our shared comfort, for meaning, for healing. We have a choice. We can embrace our humanness, which means embracing our broken natures and the compassion that remains our best hope for healing. Or we can deny our brokenness, forswear compassion, and as a result, deny our humanity. We've submitted to the harsh instinct to crush those amongst us whose brokenness is most visible. But simply punishing the broken, walking away from them, or hiding them from sight only ensures that they remain broken, and we do too. So I guess that's maybe what I mean when I say that love is the antidote to despair. We don't have to choose the cycle of mile-high expectations. We don't have to choose the cycle of mile-high expectations followed by crushing disappointment. Instead, we can choose to love each other despite our brokenness. Instead, we can choose to love a country that is broken and torn, and we can take out our mending. Yeah, there is a lot to despair about right now. And I'm sure next Tuesday or Wednesday, because it always seems to be the middle of the week, I will wake up in a puddle of despair. But I'll go downstairs and I'll make a strong cup of coffee. I will recall Violet and her best friend Sophia reaching for one another across the porch. And I'll remember the work of Eric and Janae and Tainum and Kayla and everyone else at Citizen University. And I'll remember and probably hear Luke's soul-filled songs and David's shattering poems. And I'll remember Shamichael's stirring civic sermon from last week. And I will remember all of you who came together from living rooms and bedrooms across the country. And I will be awash in gratitude. And I will be awash in love.
Wendy, we are awash in love as well. And we are so grateful to you for sharing your voice, the gifts, the images, the idea of closing that distance between the invisible hand and the invisible heart, and the idea of mending right now in this time is so powerful. And I have to imagine that if, like Janae and I, you are stirred to want to reflect on what Wendy has said and think about how that's going to play out in the way you live, even the rest of today. Forget about saving our country, just how you're going to get through the rest of the weekend. We do want to invite you to join the civic circles that will immediately follow our program here. And the link is in the chat for you to sign up for those and just enjoy small group conversation with people who've been already gathered here today from around the country and get to see each other face to face. We're going to close out this part of the program now by returning to Lightning Luke, Luke Biespiel for song, and then David Biespiel for poem.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to play an original song for you guys next that I think fits right into the theme that we've been talking about today, and it's called Head Back Home. Worn out storm clouds stained across my window. It's cold. I'm all cried out, sprawled across the floor, head against the door. Mourning all of the dreams that I know you've earned. It burns. Pale face woman drinking in her wedding gown, screams without a sound. Seizing the doorway to drunken night, going at it again, smashing all of the dreams that only they've had. Be sure to forget just how long you've been mad. And I will find it. I will find it when I get home. gazing at his palm, waiting for his call. Making his mind up, he tells the boy the truth. Hide within your youth. Stay behind this curtain, I sewed it for you. Though you stay in darkness, the light will come through. I will find it. I'll find it when I get home. Great. Thank you very much, everybody. And we're going to rotate here and have a little poetry to close out.
So much. I'm so grateful to be a part of this with Eric and Janae, and so proud of Wendy for her beautiful sermon. And I'm very proud to be the Papa Lightning to lighten the loop. I'm going to read a few passages from the poem I published as a single book a year and a half ago called Republic Cafe. And the book is about some of what Wendy was talking about, the despair one feels in a difficult time, and the relationship one requires of other people, and the spirit of love. And the poem was composed in the form of a journal, and I think you'll sense that. Tomorrow I must write, darkness at night does not support one side of the battle or the other side, but the darkness of the night too is a blanket of togetherness for love. As if in reply, Walt Whitman says, flood tide below me, I watch you face to face. Clouds of the west, sun there half an hour high. I see you also face to face. Somewhere a feather scurries over the sky, delicate bone floating away. Over the empty boulevard, below the wind, a crow glides among the dead and does not bow its head. Every time I look in the mirror now, I am like a man returning from war. And it's like I have not seen myself since the refugee camp. The mirror does not flatter. There is just whatever looks back, a face. I do not show the others. I ask, is it time to bid farewell to the half sleep that abides like a gray pond under my eyes? Is it time to say goodbye to the checkpoints, the ID stations, the guard shouting, hands above your head, walk slowly backward? Each morning, this mirror is a long hallway of black doors. And running my hand like a blind man along the walls, I unlock the door to the room that last winter's rains are forgotten. And then close the door to turn back down the gray floors, stopping again, running back up. Here I am, like an invisible man with my smithereens of faces. Tomorrow I must write, is the story ready to be returned and shared with others? I smear the ink on my fingers. The words coo like doves in the last light. What is memory but a blue marble squeezed into the hand of a little boy dressed for bed. In this room, in this great city, as if from my mouth comes music from a pair of violins and cellos, then, like a faint bird, an oboe. What remains is a candle left burning in the window so that people can see the new trench inching up in the dark. We are tailor-made to step over what comes under our feet. You ask, after all that, why does one fight to love? Because people want to love.
Thank you. Thank you, David. That was beautiful. Thank you, Lightning Luke. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Portland, Oregon. And thanks to all of you who joined us here today from wherever you are right now. And just know that when you join us and we know you're there, we do want to love, and it fills me, and I'm going to speak for Eric and say it fills him too with love. So it's a beautiful, virtuous loop. Thank you for being here. Write to us on all the social media places if you want to share any other thoughts or feelings. Eric?
Yeah, I just want to say again, thank you to everyone in the Crow's Nest. It's hard to imagine that much talent and that much heart being compressed under one roof like that. A bit of a miracle, and we're so grateful to you for sharing that with us. And it's worth reminding ourselves in these times where each of us is confined to rooms and spaces that there is talent and there is heart and there is love and there is miracle of equal measure pretty much to be found in every room in our country right now. If we open our hearts and open our minds the way that Wendy and Luke and David have invited us to today. Over these last 4 virtual Civic Saturdays, we have just been so filled with gratitude that people from around the country have reached out, thousands of folks, both tuning in live and watching afterwards to join us in these gatherings. And we're so grateful. Wendy mentioned some members of our team that I just want to salute. Tatum Fotheringill is the Senior Program Manager for Civic Saturdays, and she's literally been orchestrating all the camera switches here in our gathering. And Kayla DeMonte, our Managing Director, is who's talking to you in chat right now. And they are just 2 members of a great team that we have that's been figuring out in this time how we adjust. And I saw in the chat earlier, Caroline, another one of our civic seminarians from Seattle, sharing a message she saw posted on a billboard maybe in Ballard, Seattle, that nothing important has changed. That all the things that are important remain important. All the things that were important before the pandemic remain important. And for us at Citizen University, that's remembering that society becomes how you behave. That's remembering that we're all better off when we're all better off. That's remembering that democracy works only if enough of us believe that democracy works, and we keep on showing up for stuff like this. We are, as a team, actually going to take a small hiatus from these virtual Civic Saturdays so that we can actually go back into our test kitchen and start cooking up some other ways for you to not only engage in gatherings like this, but actually for your voices to be heard, your take on ideas, your attempts at civic sermon or civic scripture. And you'll be hearing more about that, ways to invite in more voices in this time, because I think as we see even in the chat today, people are filled, our hearts are filled with a yearning to express that sense of belonging and purpose right now. So we just want to, again, thank you all so much for being with us, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday and weekend, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.